Survival can be challenging, but trust me, it can be worse as an orphan. Paulina's life has been nothing short of miserable. She was born poor and brought up in an orphanage home. Paulina never had the chance to know her parents. According to the wards in the orphanage home, Paulina was brought in by two women who claimed to have rescued her from the roadside, where a baby blanket neatly wrapped her. She has since then lived in the orphanage home and grown up amidst her fellow orphans, even though no source has proven that she is an orphan. When she grew up, and it was time for high school, Paulina suffered a number from her colleagues at school. She was bullied not only by students, but even teachers. She was brilliant, which explains why the students might have envied her, but the teachers' detest towards Paulina couldn't be linked, because she had no parents to tip the teachers like other students. Paulina could grow past the teacher's sentimentalism and undeserved treatment from her colleagues till she graduated from high school. However, she could not further her studies in college, as there was no capability. Unfortunately for her, the orphanage that took her in was downsized and out of support from people. Hence, there was no financial strength to cater to many orphans. Once you are 18, you will have to start working to care for yourself and fend for your basic needs. Paulina strived to make things happen for her. It's tough to make it through when you have no one to fall on when you slip, and no one gets your back. It seems like it's just you against the world. Since all odds were against Paulina, she had to spread her wings and stretch her arms further than she should to break some shackles. She started at a tea shop. She was an intelligent girl, beyond that, but she was loyal, but never gained her boss's respect. The boss was of the same age as Paulina. She was still a student, as she had just been admitted into the university then. Sammy, Paulina's boss, was birthed and raised in a wealthy home. She attended the best and most expensive high school in the city. She owns the tea shop, not for survival purposes. She was forced to start and manage a business to validate her management skills, as she would be taking over her mom's big mall after college. Sammy was a spoilt brat who cared less about the shop. She established it as a stepping stone to the big thing that was to come anyway, but Paulina managed so much development of the tea shop. Sammy barely comes to the shop because she has to go to school. Paulina was both the manager and the tea attendant. Wait, did I forget to mention that she prepares the tea too? She was nice and friendly to all her customers. She had a high sense of humor, so it was not difficult to make the saddest person or someone who was having a bad day smile. Her kind gesture toward her customers made their tea shop thrive more than their counterparts in the city. Many even thought Paulina owned the tea shop, but they soon figured it out. She woke up very early every day and closed very late. She had little or no time for herself. She used to eat breakfast and dinner at work. She had no home. The shop was her house. Her income was not enough to get her an apartment, not even the cheapest, as she spent most of her wages on feeding. She once spoke to Sammy to help her out with accommodation. She asked Sammy to either loan her some money to rent an apartment or increase her wages so she could have enough to save up for accommodation. But Sammy never bought any of her ideas. Sammy claimed she couldn't help with that as she had already been given her job, knew she was sleeping in her shop, and didn't complain. Sammy often yelled at Paulina at the slightest thing. She was always aggressive and felt Paulina was the best vessel to transfer all of those aggressions. Sammy was in a relationship with a white guy in her college. They always had issues, and Paulina suffered those issues. There was a profound scenario that happened on a fateful day. It was a sunny afternoon. Paulina was exhausted and ran out of strength attending to customers. She took a nap after a long moment of listening to tens of customers. She attended to all of them alone. There was no assistant to help out, nor was Sammy available to help out. She knew better than to complain. The last time she pitched Sammy to get an aide to help with stuff, Sammy insulted her and called her several unprinted names. So, back in the day, she was stressed out. She decided to take a nap. Unfortunately for her, Sammy walked in on her sleeping. She became furious. There were no customers to attend to as students who patronized had gone back to classes since break time was over. Sammy didn't care about that. She quickly went to one of the kettles that were standing in the basement. She promptly poured some tea into a cup and ran it on Paulina. The tea was hot. Paulina swiftly jumped up from her sleep and growled in pain. Sammy stared at her unapologetically. Paulina became teary. She tried to hold the tears, but as she tried to explain herself, the tears rolled down profusely. Ever since that unforgivable saga, Paulina feared for her life. A woman who could pour one hot tea can kill. Paulina endured this for years, even though her customers, having noticed Sammy's cruelty towards her, had advised her to quit, but it seemed her hands were tied. She had no choice but to tolerate Sammy's barbaric attitude and gesture toward her. After 3 years of working as a manager, attendant, and kitchen girl, but unappreciated and paid stipends, Sammy eventually sacked Paulina. This was her way of compensating her. Her reason was that she finally passed her mom's test to become the next manager of her mall since she was able to thrive in the tea shop. However, in a real sense, we all know Paulina deserved the whole accolades. Being sad was an understatement for Paulina. She was bereaved and heartbroken. She needed money to at least secure herself an apartment. She went to her knees, with tears in her eyes, begging Sammy to help with some cash as the news came in as a shock to her. Sammy condemned her for not being financially wise as she couldn't save anything for herself after working for her for years. She swore she would not help as there was no probability that Paulina would even manage the money. Sammy chased her out of the tea shop and told her not to check back because she had sold out the shop already, and the person would not want anyone frolicking around the vicinity of the tea shop. Paulina was still on her knees, hoping to find favor in Sammy's sight when Sammy flung Paulina's clothes through the window and kicked her out, claiming that she was dumb not to have savings. Paulina had no choice but to settle for the street. She picked up her clothes, about 3 of them, and wandered down the road as she blamed life for being unfair to her. After walking for hours, she finally decided to settle at one bridge far from the city. She couldn't stay in the central city because of shame. Besides, she didn't want to be a symbol of pity or sympathy by those who knew her. She managed to get 2 big blankets with a little penny on her. She was to lay on one and cover herself with the other because of the cold to avoid developing pneumonia. The following day, she started asking for alms from those who were passing. At least she could get her daily bread. She was opportune to get a basket which she placed at her front to symbolize that she was a beggar and needed the help of those the Lord blessed. This went on for months. Alms begging has become Paulina's escape route. She has been able to survive and even gathered some cash for herself. The plan was to do this alms-begging thing for a few months more to get a small apartment and start a small business from the money saved up. On this particular day, a young woman approached Paulina. She was looking rough and unkempt. From the look, one could quickly tell she was in worse condition. She looked like a fowl that was drenched by rain and helpless. She swiftly went to her knees as she joined her 2 hands firmly, like someone who wanted to beg for something. Paulina quickly told her to get up and asked about the problem. She narrated her ordeal and explained how she lost her husband and everything to the course. She begged Paulina for help as she was starving and could die if she didn't get food. Paulina empathized with her. She asked for her name and she said her name was Jane. What a poor widow, Paulina thought as she tried to console her. Without demand, Paulina offered Jane one of her 2 blankets. Jane was shocked at her kind gesture and thanked her. Paulina quickly went out of her way to get Jane some food so she could eat. Immediately, she created some space under the bridge and told her she could pair her hole. Paulina had to mop the space very well for the 2 of them as they had to manage just 2 blankets. They were left with the choice of laying on the blankets or covering themselves. Jane quickly came up with the idea of sharing collectively. They would lay on one and use the other to cover their bodies. It was a brilliant idea, and they utilized it. Paulina and Jane became partner beggars. They fed on the money they got daily and saved the remaining as they both aimed for better days. They made plans for their better days. Jane wouldn't stop singing the praises of Paulina and would often tell her that someday she hoped to compensate her for what she had done for her. Paulina returned the compliment by thanking Jane for being sociable too, and at least she is no longer lonely now, and thanks Jane for that. After a month, Paulina suggested they start working rather than depending on only alms begging. They would still keep begging, which would serve as a second hustle. They drew out a plan. It was more like shifting positions. While one person goes to work today, the other stays back to get alms, switching departments the following day. It was a brilliant and well-orchestrated plan, but Jane objected. She said Paulina might not need a side hustle and might even have to stop begging for alms. At this moment, Paulina was confused as you had read this. Why would you suggest we stop asking for alms and still work, Jane? Jane smiled brightly as she patted Paulina on the shoulder and told her that she had something to say to her, which was more like a confession. At this moment, Paulina focused on Jane as she was curious. Many questions were running through her head, but she tried to calm herself and hoped everything was fine as she asked Jane what the confession was. Jane took a long breath. She then told Paulina that she was not what she had posed to be, and that she would love to apologize to Paulina. This time, Paulina was more confused. She asked her, "What do you mean, Jane? I mean, I know your story. Why think I don't know you?" Jane didn't hesitate to tell Paulina that she was not a widow and she wasn't wretched as she had made her believe. She was a billionaire and she lived on the island. She had only decided to pull up a social experiment. Paulina had proven beyond reasonable doubt that they are still very compassionate people amongst the poor, and many would love to help if only they had the needed resources. She apologized to Paulina again for being unfaithful, but that was the best way she could get the best result, void of sentiments. She assured Paulina that she ceased to be a beggar from that moment. In respect of that, she gave Paulina $200,000 to get herself a very reputable apartment and start that dream business she had always told her about during their stay together. She handed Paulina the cash in a black briefcase alongside her complimentary card and told her not to hesitate to reach out to her whenever she needed any financial assistance. Paulina was speechless. She was dumbfounded. It looked like a dream. She never thought of a day like that, even in her wildest fantasy. She knelt at her feet of Jane as she cried profusely without saying a word. Jane managed to pull her up and whispered to her ears, "Your kind attitude and compassion for others have brought you thus far. Do not stop being awesome." While at that, an SUV with a customized number plate parked in the front. Jane told Paulina her driver was here, and she had to leave. She bade her farewell and success in her endeavors. Paulina's world changed in the twinkle of an eye. She moved to another city and erected a big mall for herself. The mall had several departments, including the tea segment, which she added concerning her humble background. Paulina lived happily ever after.
On October 25th, Allison, a young artist's life, divided into before and after. She was informed that her parents had died in a car accident. There was a terrible accident on the road. Heavy rain and poor visibility on the road caused it. Fear, uncertainty, and sadness overwhelmed the girl. She was left alone in a big and unfair world. There were no more people she loved more than herself. She was angry, crying, and suffering. She didn't leave the house for weeks. As a child, Allison had a friend named Ron. From an early age, they played with each other and spent much time together. Their families communicated well. Ron and Allison's parents shared a profitable business. They ran a construction company. For a small town, it was a perfect business. Mothers of children were housewives. Their main interest was to attend social events. Their names were known in local circles. They were published in local newspapers, and people watched the lives of each family member. Their popularity grew every year. Their income increased. The fathers dreamed of the future of Ron and Allison and their continuation of the family business. Finally, the children grew up. Ron was immediately taken to the holding of his father. Allison graduated from the Academy of Art. She dreamed of becoming an architect since childhood. Management didn't interest Allison. Ron showed interest in the girl. He courted her, asked her out, and gave flowers and expensive gifts. But Allison didn't reciprocate with Ron. She considered him a good friend, but no more. Her heart was empty and forbidden to him, no matter how hard Ron tried. "What can I do for you?" Ron asked once Allison nervously. "You can't make someone feel something that isn't there and never will be." Allison said it very coldly, without looking him in the eye. She couldn't bring herself to love him. Allison was different, not like her family. Social events and luxurious life were of no interest to the girl. She helped children's homes, attended art exhibitions, and studied. Ron looked like his father. He was persistent, determined, and cunning. Ron was prepared to do whatever he could to achieve his own goals. Ron's father was very stubborn and could do anything for his son to make him happy. He didn't want to watch his son suffer. Dad tried to console his son, gave him many opportunities, acquainted him with the beautiful daughters of his partners, and helped financially. But all this was unsuccessful. There was only one thing in Ron's mind: Allison. Ron's family was trying to support poor Allison. The accident left a significant mark on her life. She lost hope for a promising and bright future. She was grateful to Ron's family for their care and help. She realized that she had no one closer to this family. Out of desperation, the girl agreed to accept Ron's hand and heart and continue the business with him as her late father would have wished. The girl did not feel happy. She was lost. She lived only by work and the idea that she had to continue to work for those she loved. There was no other way out. Ron and his family cared for Allison. Despite their concern, she felt alone and distant. She was like a bird in a cage she'd driven herself into with hopelessness. She never left her thoughts of her parents. She couldn't believe it had happened. Time was passing and grief remained in her heart. Those she loved were killed. The police closed the case quickly, citing heavy rain on the day of the accident. The press soon fell silent. Although the family was famous in the city, there were many moments she did not understand. She didn't figure out what happened because the accident couldn't have been an accident. Allison took all her grief on canvas. She was distracted from the world only when she was drawing. She was drawing a lot. Her paintings were all gloomy, as was her life. She shut herself down. With Ron, they lived as neighbors, even though the guy was hoping that Allison would one day respond with feelings for him. That never happened. Ron was comfortable with the love being there for him. A year passed. The firm was thriving thanks to its young heirs. One day, Ron came to his father's office and found a strange envelope on his desk. His curiosity played its role. It had all the secret data hidden from tax agents and their gray bookkeeping. He knew it could bankrupt the company. The note said, "Go to the police and admit what you did." Ron immediately went to the office to look for his father. He pulled him from the meeting and asked him for an explanation. "What the hell is this, Dad?" Ron asked. "Let me explain it at home to you tonight," Father answered. "No, I want to know right now," Ron said rudely. "Well, I've been getting these threats lately. I don't know who they are and what they want from me." "Dad, but it says to confess. What do you need to confess?" "I don't know," Ron's father answered. Ron turned and went back to his office. He had long been tormented by thoughts of what was happening. He was trying to understand what his father could be hiding. Ron called his assistant Jack and asked him to provide him with all the company documents for the past 5 years. He checked profits and losses until late at night, suspended licenses and contracts. When Ron came home, Allison was fast asleep. He kissed her and lay down beside her. Ron could not sleep. He wanted to find out what was going on behind his back. How could his dad do something like that? Ron entered his father's office more often, looking for clues. One day, he returned to his father's, and he was not there. There was a new envelope on the table. He opened it impatiently. "You rigged the accident," it was written in a note. Ron turned pale and dropped the envelope with the message. He immediately knew what kind of accident it was talking about. The young man could not believe his father could do such a thing. He was angry and confused at the same time. How could you so cruelly get rid of your friends and business partners? What was the need to do this? He had to hide the note. Ron wanted to expose his father. He started asking tricky questions about the day, October 25th. He asked his dad where he was and who he was with. He was doing his research. He didn't want his father to go to prison, but he wasn't going to let him get away with it either. After a while, Ron received a note addressed to him. It said, "You don't know your father well." Ron had suddenly lost all sense of what was going on. What was his father hiding from him? Or someone brazenly lied all this time through the letters and tried to drive his father crazy. Perhaps it was the tricks of business competitors. Then, where did the black books come from? Ron didn't want the family scandal at all. The press spread information quickly, especially if it was scandalous. Ron began to sort out his father's affairs. He stopped paying attention to his wife's business and thought less about his work. He was like a detective trying to dig up the secrets of his father. His connections helped him to find information that his father had another son with a woman. His father never mentioned his son. Ron decided to ask his mother. She was surprised and had to tell about his father's mistress and illegitimate child. "It was a long time ago. You were still young. I found a letter with a photo of the baby. Your father denied that it was his child. That's all I knew." Ron was beside himself with anger. He could not even imagine that he had lived so many years in his father's lies. When his father came home, Ron threw all the notes on the table in front of him and asked for an explanation. His father was surprised and could not say anything. "Why did you keep all this from me? Brother? Accident? Company scams?" Ron asked monotonously. "I wanted a happy family. That woman was a mistake. I didn't want to leave your mother and you. You knew about the accident. It was the only way you could get Allison. Her father was too stubborn and insistent. He did not agree to many things that would bring us profit. Yes, it was a fraud, but the business wouldn't have worked otherwise. I did everything for you." Ron turned and walked away, slamming the door. The next day, Ron waited for Allison for a long time. No one had seen her that day. It was October 25th, 2 years after the accident. About noon, Ron heard a stir in the corridor. Looking out, he saw a police squad picking up his father. He turned to Jack to call a lawyer, but he wasn't there either. When he returned to the office to collect his father's belongings, he saw another envelope. "No one escapes punishment. Your brother, Jack." There were all the company's documents about transferring ownership to Jack and Allison. They were copies. Ron realized what an end their family was waiting for, and nothing could be done at the moment. He followed after his father. As it turned out, after graduating and coming to the firm, Allison fell in love with assistant Jack at first sight. Jack was later a blackmailer and secret brother of Ron's. Ron did not notice as he was investigating his father's lies. Jack eventually came forward and made the argument that Allison's parents had been murdered. He took a job at his father's and brother to avenge his mother. It was easy to find Ron's family. The family were often reported in newspapers and the press. He's been following the family's business for a long time, learning about work moments and looking for weak spots to push on. Jack had access to all the documents and was well aware of the firm's business. He waited for the right moment to destroy everything they had. He couldn't forgive a father for not acknowledging his second child. His father left his woman alone with the baby without money or help. Jack and Allison had good reasons for revenge. Everyone wanted this family to pay the price for their actions. Although Ron was not guilty of anything, he too was cunning and complex as it seemed. Ron was very much like his father. When he heard of his father's affairs, Ron did not report him to the police, which proved his nature. He could have also gone to prison for accounting as an executive director. But Jack and Allison didn't frame Ron. They put his father in charge of everything. Ron's father faced life in prison on 2 counts: a premeditated murder of several individuals and high-profile fraud. So much evidence was presented in court that the case could not be closed this time so easily with the help of his father's attorneys. Jack and Allison were able to right their wrongs and avenge their loved ones. They transferred the ownership and started the firm without fraud. Jack owned the company under the same rights as Ron. Although he was an illegitimate child, he had proof of paternity. Jack was in charge of management, overseeing company affairs. Allison became the chief architect of the holding. Her dream came true. She was doing her favorite thing. Allison donated some of her company's income to orphanages. One day, she had an idea. She wanted to auction the paintings she had painted after her parents' accident and donate all the funds to the orphanage. The auction was a tribute to her beloved father and mother. Jack was happy to support Allison and help with the organization. Soon, Allison's marriage to Ron was dissolved unilaterally, and she was able to marry Jack. Finally, Allison felt happy and loved. Her cell broke down in an instant, and she was able to take off. She was deeply in love with Jack. They had beautiful children. They looked like Allison's parents. Their lives were full of meaning. She became friends with Jack's mother immediately. She was a sweet, modest woman, much like her mother. Allison began to call her mother. Grandma spent time with the kids while the parents worked. They had a pleased and sincere family. Allison wasn't alone anymore. Ron's father had been imprisoned. Ron had taken his mother and left the country. They knew there would be no more meaningful life in this city in the past. They were never heard from again. Father was justly punished for his actions. It was a pity that he realized everything when it was already very late. After 20 years, his father got out early, but had nowhere to go. Everything he cared about disappeared because of one act. He later hung himself in his apartment. His son and wife did not come to his funeral. Maybe they didn't even know about the end of the man who once ruined their lives. Allison and Jack learned of the death from the newspapers. They visited the cemetery once a year. They visited Allison's parents. The smell of black tea wafted in the air. Martha turned off the stove and arranged the teacups on the table where Thomas was reading the Daily Times newspaper. Over the years, the couple had become a habit of having breakfast together before leaving for work. The kids usually have breakfast first before joining their school bus. For the couple's breakfast was more or less a time to bond, chat, and eat. Adams lost his wife yesterday. The doctors couldn't save her. Thomas disclosed the sad news to his wife. Martha's hands covered her mouth, and her eyes widened in shock. Oh my God! God's blessing and peace. How is Adam managing the whole situation? He is devastated. Maybe we should help him with some chores. Of course, yes. How can I help? Thompson swirled his tea with his spoon and thought before replying. Can you take care of cooking for him? Of course. I will help him around the house for a while. All right, I think this arrangement is fine. We can make him some hot meal once a week, since he has no close relatives living in the area. Sure, I think I can do that at the end of each week. Thank you. Thompson squeezed his wife's hands and smiled sweetly at her. In his heart, he knew he could always count on her. Martha playfully slaps his shoulder. Don't thank me. He's our friend. I feel sorry for Adams. It must be a huge toll on him. After breakfast, the couple headed out for work. They both agreed to attend the deceased burial at noon. When her phone rang, she knew it was her husband. At the same time, she noticed it was noon. It seemed as though time was fast. Earlier, when she got to work, she had taken permission to attend Jenny's burial. Thompson was dressed in an all-black suit and shirt. Martha knew the moment didn't call for flattery, but she couldn't but admire how gorgeous her husband looked. It seemed as though God himself created him. His slender build showed just how much he worked out. His hair was always well-trimmed and usually smelled nice. On the other hand, Martha wore a black gown that ended just below her knees. She packed her hair in a ponytail, making her look younger than usual. She didn't wear jewelry, since Thompson had informed her of the ceremony. The couple were 16 minutes late when they arrived at the cemetery. The priest had already started the procession. The weather was slowly darkening, meaning it would begin to rain soon. Hence, the priest tried to speed up the process. While lying the coffin on the ground, it started to drizzle. Adams clutched a stalk of rose flowers in his hand. He was unable to say any last words to his deceased wife. He stared blankly at the coffin. Martha stared at him deep in thought. She couldn't help but wonder if he was crying or if the drizzle had splattered on his face. For close to 2 weeks, Martha had been shuffling her job, taking care of her family and Adams, who showed no sign of coming out of his depression. Martha was in the laundry room, sorting out the laundry, sorting a new set of clothes to send into the machine, and folding the dry ones. She was focused on completing the task. Suddenly, she felt a hand sneak around her waist, and a soft lip pecked her cheek. She blushed and nudged Thompson by his side. "Babe, the kids are home." Thompson taps her head. "Your head is always filled with dirty thoughts. I'm just playing around with my wife. Nothing more." "Oh, I see. Can I help you out?" "Sure." Martha replies and assigns him a task. While doing the chores, Thompson keeps staring at her, unsure how to present the issue in his mind. Noticing her husband's frequent stares, Martha inquires about why he has been staring. "Is there something you would like to ask or say?" "I think 1 meal a week is not enough for Adam." "Oh, maybe, but I can only cook at the end of the week." Thompson looks at her shyly and speaks apprehensively. "Maybe we could try cooking twice a week? I'd help out. But how? I work 5 days a week in 2 jobs." "Yes, I'm sorry. It was a bit selfish of me to do that." Martha breathes deeply. She feels uncomfortable knowing her husband was trying to be selfless and caring towards his friends, but she is thinking about her job first. It must be hard for him, right? Did he ask for a meal, or is it just your thoughts? "Well, I got it from his words," Thompson said while scratching his head. "Okay, I'll take some time off every Wednesday and cook for him. Our friend has lost his wife. My boss should understand." "Thank you." Thompson pecked his wife on the cheeks. He was grateful to God for blessing him with an understanding wife. The mall was particularly busy since it was the weekend. There was a long queue at the checkpoint. It seemed that everyone was trying to restock their groceries or shop for items for their families. Martha was rolling her cart out of the mall, feeling tired. She was at the checkpoint for more than 30 minutes before it got to her turn. While offloading the groceries into the car's trunk, her phone kept ringing. From the ringing tone, she knew it was her husband, because she had a distinct ringing tone for him. She rummaged through her bag and found her phone. Thompson sounded desperate from his end, and the rush in his voice unsettled her. "Did you get everything?" "Yes, I got everything that was on the list, and I added a little of my own. Is everything okay?" "Good. He just sent me the message. He wants only the decapriccio pasta." Martha pulled a long face. Although Thompson couldn't see her, he could tell she was unhappy from her voice. "Decapriccio? What is that?" "It's a brand of pasta or something. I think his wife used to cook that for him." Martha inhales profoundly, trying not to explode, and talks calmly with her husband. "There's a queue at the mall. He may have to make do with what we have." "Darling, as much as I hate to inconvenience you, can we just do this for the sake of our friend?" "I'm not impressed by this. I was just at the counter for close to 30 minutes, but it's fine. I could get someone to help me out since it's just pasta." Reluctantly, Martha returned to the mall to get the pasta. Ever since Adams lost his wife, his routine changed. It became as though they started living for Adams. Today, she hoped they could take a break and have a little time for themselves. After cooking for her family and storing Adam's food in a pack, she notified her husband that they could drive down to Adams. The couple had a quiet trip down to Adams' house. Thompson pulled over and reached out for Martha's hand. Martha finally spoke for the first time in their 15-minute drive. "Take the food to him and come back immediately, okay? Let's go to the lake together. I don't want to miss the show." Thompson sighs uncomfortably and explains, "Sorry, he asked me if I could help him clean up his garage." "Okay, I mean it's been 2 months since his wife passed away." "Yes, sorry. By the way, he would like you to cook 3 times a week for him." Martha stared blankly at her husband. She couldn't believe he could suggest that. knowing her boss already hated her. "You know the situation I'm in at work, so did you tell him that I can't?" She noticed her husband couldn't even look her straight in the eye. He stuttered while replying. "Not yet. I said that you would probably be okay with that." "What?" "I have a full-time job. I still have to clean the house and do chores, cook for our children and you and Adams." Thompson held her hand to convince her. "Well, this is temporary. He is suffering enough these days." Martha felt her husband was overindulging Adams. Deep down, she wanted to yell at him, but decided to concede to his request. Despite being unhappy, Martha played along for her husband's sake. Weeks went by, and Adams wasn't showing any signs of independence. He still relied on Thompson and his wife. Martha felt like a burden was on her. She had volunteered to help, not cast a duty on herself, and create a rift between herself and her husband. Recently, Adams' requests were irking her, and no matter what he requested, her husband always gave in. Thompson was in the office dozing off when a message notification woke him up. "Hi, this is Nicholas. I have some guests tonight, 6 people. Can you arrange something for the table?" Thompson immediately tries to contact his wife, but she doesn't take her calls. He kept on sending messages, but she didn't reply. At 6 p.m., he called his wife, but got no response. He also called the house line, yet there was no response. He stormed into the house by 7:30 p.m. Martha was dressing, her phone, and snacking on a bowl of grapes. He felt his blood boil. "Why didn't you pick up the phone today?" Thompson asked angrily. "Did I have to?" Thompson was taken aback by her rudeness. His wife had always been calm and level-headed. He breathed and explained. Adams had guests over and had to order pizza. "So what? What's wrong with ordering some pizza for his friends? Everyone knows he has no wife anymore." "Maybe, but he is my friend and your friend too. What would the guests think of this? What a shame for us." Martha had enough of the torture. She needed Thompson to understand that they had done enough for Adams. "Oh, sorry, dear husband. I can only be your wife. I can't be his wife at the same time." "What are you talking about? Don't you get it? I cook 3 times a week for him, on our money. Maybe it's enough already. You spend time with him in the garage and play games so that he isn't bored. But you do that when you have free time, but I have no free time." "This is temporary," Thompson screamed at his wife. He couldn't understand what possessed her. "It should stop. 4 months have already passed." "Hello? He has already started inviting his friends and having fun. He could have learned to cook already." The couple kept arguing back and forth. Thompson thought his wife was being unreasonably cruel. Martha, on the other hand, believed her husband was being soft-hearted. Finally, Martha suggested, "Why don't you cook for him, Mr. Nice Man?" "I don't know how to cook. Maybe you should quit your job. If you quit, you could cook for him every day. Your salary is miserable anyways." "What the hell are you talking about? Do you dare degrade my work for your friend? Screw you. Screw you and your friend. I'm out of this shit. I'm not playing this game anymore." Martha felt hurt. She couldn't believe her husband had spoken those words. She felt like she didn't matter to him anymore. "Darling, calm down. Stop talking about him like that and consider my words. Thompson, I'm not his secretary. I am not Mother Teresa to him. I have my jobs. I have worries. Everything has a limit. You are not protecting me right now, and he owns our life, controls it, and dictates what we should do." Thompson looked at his wife, feeling a bit unsettled. He realized there was an element of truth in her words. Without waiting for her husband's reply, she declared, "From this day on, there will be no food for him. I'm quitting taking care of him. Give, but give until it hurts. Mother Teresa."
Mom is no longer with us. Catherine heard her father's quiet, confused voice. He stood perplexed, with the phone in his hand, looking at Catherine with a devastated look. Daddy, what's wrong? Please tell me." Catherine was shaking her father's hand, and the wild fear of tragedy shackled the whole body of the 15-year-old girl. "Your mother died during childbirth," the father replied, stammering and barely holding back tears. Unbearable pain squeezed the girl's heart. Just yesterday, they were discussing the name of the future baby with Mom and Dad. Catherine had pressed her hands and cheek against her mother's stomach and listened to her sister move. And at night, her mother was taken by ambulance to the maternity hospital with contractions. Catherine hardly slept the rest of the night, waiting for the joyful news and imagining what her little sister would be like. Catherine didn't want to believe what she had heard. Shock, fear, indignation, and misunderstanding overwhelmed the girl. No, no, no! She felt as if everything inside her screamed. Acceptance began to come to her gradually. Grief gripped the family. Catherine and Dad hugged each other tightly and cried bitterly. A few days later, the baby was discharged from the hospital. "Our Mirabelle," Catherine and her father spoke at the same time. Mirabelle was the name they all chose together on the eve of her mother's unexpected. Dad and Catherine brought little Mirabelle home and put her in a crib. The baby girl yawned and smiled sleepily, as if to show that everything will be fine. "I am your Mirabelle." Catherine quickly matured because now she was taking the place of Mirabelle's mother. Catherine took full care of her sister. Little Mirabelle was happiness and joy for their family, and 5 years later, another tragedy came to their house. Dad was gone. Everything reminded Catherine of her former happiness, about her carefree childhood while her mother was alive, about how she and Dad raised Mirabelle together. But Catherine also could not forget all these tragic events that took place in her home and in her family. "Mirabelle, you're going to school soon," Catherine said. "What city would you like to study in?" "In a big, beautiful one, so that there was a river and a zoo, a skating rink, and even carousels," Mirabelle listed, bending her small fingers to count. Catherine hugged the girl and realized which city they would move to the place where happiness awaits them. The evening in the Smith family passed as usual. The head of the family, George, while waiting for dinner, aimlessly clicked the buttons on the TV remote and scolded without malice that there were more and more channels, and there was simply nothing to watch with pleasure. Elizabeth, along with her 12-year-old daughter Emma, cooked simple but very tasty dishes. "Remember, daughter, when you mash the potatoes a little, then add milk, be sure to warm it up at the beginning." "I know, Mom. You've already told me that 1,000 times." "We also need to make sure that the foam does not get there." The girl charmingly wrinkled her nose, showing her attitude to this product. "Do not worry. It is simply impossible to forget your science." George and Elizabeth's eldest son, Danny, 25, was also in the kitchen, having returned to his father's house after a short marriage of 3 months. He was slicing vegetables for a salad and thought how lucky he was with his family after all. How could he have imagined that his wife Lily, who claimed her faithful love, was so easy and simple to cheat on him? Parting with his wife greatly affected the guy's ego. His ex-wife reproached him for financial insolvency and lack of activity in the performance of marital duty. In general, the only joy in this difficult situation for Danny was the fact that his relatives did not get on his nerves, and they just didn't think about Lily, as if she didn't exist. Finally, Elizabeth, together with the children, cooked all the dishes, and the whole family traditionally sat down at the table. Between mashed potatoes and salad, the son announced to his parents that he would celebrate New Year's Eve, not at home, but with his former classmates. Harry got divorced too. Invited Andrew, Serge, and me, in general, our entire male company, both housewarming and celebrating the new year at once. The news did not come as a surprise to parents. After all, they understood perfectly well that their son had grown up a long time ago. And besides, all the guys listed were well known to them. Andrew, Serge, and Harry met Danny at school, and surprisingly, time did not affect their friendship too much. They studied together at the same institute. And Harry and Andrew even worked together. And Elizabeth and George, without collusion, thought that an evening with old friends would help him unwind. "Say hello to all the guys for us," Danny's mom smiled tenderly, and in general invited them to sit with us sometime. "I haven't seen them for a long time. I missed them." "That's right, son. We'll get your console from the mezzanine, and we'll play like before." George got the idea of his wife. Emma tried to ask Danny to come to Harry's New Year's celebration, but received a firm and terse refusal from her brother. "Don't even think about it." The month remaining before the holiday flew by unnoticed. After congratulating his parents and sister on the upcoming, Danny got ready to visit a friend. In one hand, the guy had a bulky bag with groceries that he had bought on the table, and in the other, with Mom's salties. With all the supplies, he went to Harry. Because of the terrible ice, the sidewalk looked more like an ice rink. And Danny saw how, almost at the very entrance to a friend's house, a girl fell backwards, absurdly waving her hands with packages. Approaching her, he put down his bags and helped her get up and collect the rolled tangerines. "Oh, thank you very much," the stranger thanked him. "I don't understand how she managed to fall." The girl only looked straight into Danny's eyes for a few seconds, but he felt a warm and pleasant feeling in his heart. "Absolutely, not at all. It's so slippery here." And the guy hurried to pick up his bags, because his plans did not include a new novel at all. However, it turned out that both he and the stranger go to the same entrance. The girl, after a little hesitation, still entered the elevator with Danny. They almost said in unison, "I'm on the 4th." It was impossible not to smile. And the girl asked, "Are you going to Harry's by any chance?" "Yes, this is an old friend of mine." Dima really liked the gray eyes of the traveling companion and the cute dimples appearing on her cheeks and the minimal amount of cosmetics which his ex-wife was so fond of. "I have agreed to celebrate the New Year with him. Are you going to celebrate with him too?" "No, I live next door to him." A short conversation was interrupted with the opening of the elevator, and Danny decided to introduce himself for some reason. My name is Daniel." "Catherine," the girl answered, and opened the door with her key, letting her companion inside and showing that Harry lived here. "I wish you all the best and Happy New Year." Danny knocked on the door of Harry's apartment and soon found himself among loyal friends. "Oh, what a surprise, Danny," Harry yelled with joy. "Didn't we lock the door here?" "No, your neighbor let me in, Catherine." "Good girl," the landlord immediately responded and added, "It's a pity that the girl is a little harsh." Andrew and Serge's friendly laughter erupted immediately. "Has she already turned you down? Did you not appreciate the unearthly beauty and cosmic charm?" In a noisy atmosphere of mutual jokes, friends saw off the old year, and the apartment continued to be filled with new guests. Harry explained to his friends that he had also invited his colleagues, who had nowhere to celebrate the holiday. As a result, the company turned out to be twice as large as planned. Instead of friendly gatherings of 4, 10 people gathered. The atmosphere, despite the fact that many were strangers, was cheerful. But there were problems with the furniture. A sofa and 2 chairs were available, but there were not enough seats at the table. And Harry turned to Danny. "Listen, friend, can you go to the neighbor and ask for chairs? And then we have some kind of buffet, turns out." Danny was surprised to realize that he was as worried as before a date when he knocked on Catherine's door. A pretty girl in a simple but surprisingly suitable dress opened the door for him without asking who came. And from behind, with enthusiastic cries, a girl of about 6 jumped out with huge bows fluttering over pigtails like exotic pink butterflies. "Mommy, Catherine!" "Hooray! Santa Claus has come!" "No, Mirabelle, it's not him," Catherine replied. "It's Daniel, a friend of our neighbor." Excuse me, can you help out with the chairs?" Danny was a little surprised that a noticeably young girl as Catherine seemed to him had such an adult daughter. "Harry, it seems, called the whole city to him," he said, trying to make an awkward joke. I imagine, Catherine said. Of course, I'll help you out. Mirabelle and I are celebrating together today. We're not waiting for anyone, so we'll sit on the couch. In the kitchen, there was an appetizing aroma of vanilla. He didn't even really want to go back to his friend's apartment. However, he took the offered chairs and with regret left the girl he liked so much. The fun was in full swing, but Danny was uneasy. He wanted to look into Catherine's eyes again, and even the girl's daughter didn't bother him at all. Therefore, he gladly volunteered to walk to the nearest open supermarket when it turned out that Andrew had forgotten to buy water and tonic, which the ladies from Harry's work who came to the party erratically asked for. Come on, Andrew, I'll walk with you, otherwise it will be hard to bring. And there was ice on the street, Danny said, and he remembered how he met Catherine. Even in the store, he couldn't get rid of thoughts of Catherine and Mirabelle waiting for Santa Claus. He added a soft rabbit and a surprise toy, a Santa Claus hat and beard, a bar of high-quality chocolate, and a bottle of sparkling wine to the cart. Catching the surprised look on his friend's face, he explained, I'll bring it to my neighbor for letting us use her chairs. Otherwise, I'm uncomfortable. Danny put the souvenirs for the charming Catherine and her daughter in separate gift bags, and sliding and cursing, the guys still got to their destination. Andrew brought the drinks into Harry's apartment, and Danny, wearing the attributes of a fairy tale character, knocked on the neighbor's door again. Where is the girl who was waiting for me? Slightly changing his voice, he asked Catherine and winked. The joyful Mirabelle looked attentively at the guest and hurriedly told him poems and in general everything that seemed important to her. She told him, Next year I will go to school. I already got a backpack, and after the holidays, I'll go back to prep school. It's good that you came to us because Catherine doesn't believe in miracles at all for some reason. Handing the girl a well-deserved gift and waiting until she ran away to examine it, he handed a modest present to Catherine. It's like compensation for chairs, inconveniences, and in general. We will obviously make noise and we will interfere with Mirabelle's rest. Danny, how embarrassing. I don't even know how to thank you. Mirabelle wanted a holiday so much. As luck would have it, I didn't have much money now, and it's expensive to order Santa Claus during the new year as a fee to pay a world-class star. All you're doing today is helping me out. Tears sparkled in Catherine's eyes, and Danny hurried away. Because another minute, and he would have completely lost his head. The magical midnight in which it is customary to make a wish flashed by. Fireworks were booming, and Danny did not forget for a second about the neighbor who was so close, and, at the same time, so far away. He was trying to figure out why he was attracted to the girl. But then he gave up on everything and began to come to her after work. They took Mirabelle with them, and remembering their childhood, they went downhill, played snowballs, and just enjoyed life. The romance developed quickly, and on March 8th, Danny decided to introduce Catherine to his family. Elizabeth, having learned that her son would bring a girl to whom he wanted to propose soon, began to ask Danny, Who is she? How old is she? Aren't you in too much of a hurry? Danny told her everything he knew. He did not keep silent about the fact that Catherine is raising Mirabelle alone. Elizabeth tried to reason with her son that having children is not easy. She explained that he would have to build a relationship not only with the woman he loved, but also with the girl. And it's not easy, both morally and financially. Danny cut off all the lectures. I do not care. Please don't be upset, but I'm not leaving Catherine or Mirabelle. When they first met Catherine, Danny's parents were wary about her. Elizabeth looked into the girl's face, could not drive away from herself the unpleasant thoughts that her son wanted to burden himself with raising someone else's child. Only the younger sister was childishly enthusiastic. Emma, having filled the plates with delicacies, handed Mirabelle lemonade and glasses and immediately took the guest to her room. Danny tried to shield Catherine from Mom and Dad's questions, but when Elizabeth asked the girl to help her with the plates, George restrained him, who rushed into the kitchen by the hand, and he whispered softly, Don't bother Mom, son. Elizabeth did not stand up for a long time and immediately asked a direct question. Catherine, I'm sorry, it's none of my business, But are you really only 21 years old, as my son said? The girl, without ceasing to wipe the plates, nodded yes. And anticipating your question, I will answer. I was not married, but do not rush to draw conclusions. Mirabelle is my sister. Mom died when Mirabelle was born. My father died a year ago from a heart attack, and we moved to this city. It was too difficult for me at home, a lot of unhappy memories, and nothing kept me there. I don't tell the Cavaliers right away that Mirabelle is actually not my daughter, but my sister, because it is simply impossible to separate us. She calls me Mom, too. Anyway, I've been raising her since she was a baby. I have no one closer to me, and I understand that I do not want to communicate with them at all, and we are clearly not in the way. Elizabeth, sobbing, hugged the girl and said, I hope Danny passed this test of yours. Catherine smiled sheepishly because he had passed. I just don't know how to tell him about it. Elizabeth and Catherine returned to the table with puffy eyes, but smiling. That evening, she told Danny the truth. They celebrated the next New Year already acting as a young family. And Harry was a witness at the wedding because he was charming and a good neighbor.